Hey, welcome to another exciting episode of Black Beat Podcast, brought to you by Flossin Media, and I'm your host, John Washington, the CEO of Flossin Media. And I'm joined by my co-host today, Fawn Aberson, managing editor of Flossin Magazine, and Dr. Stephen Holt, the CEO of Try Excellence and the chair of Oversight Committee of the North-Northeast Housing Strategies under the Portland Housing Commission. Today, we have a distinct honor of welcoming a special guest, my friend, Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon.
Senator Ron Wyden has been a steadfast advocate for justice and equity, and today we're going to dive into two critical issues he's addressing in our community and beyond. First, we're going to discuss the alarming racial disparities in mortgage lending practices at the Navy Federal Credit Union, as revealed in recent reports. And Senator Wyden, along with his colleagues, has called for a thorough review to ensure fair lending practices for all. Secondly, we're going to explore new legislation introduced by Senator Wyden to crack down on companies using price-fixing algorithms to inflate rents. The legislation aims to protect renters and combat the housing affordability crisis. Senator Wyden, thanks for joining us today, and I guess let's dive right in.
Senator ain't gonna be did anybody order lunch? No. Hey, here's something that came across my desk, Senator, and I'm gonna tee this up for you. Okay. Companies like RealPage, Yardi brand themselves as providing property management software, but in reality, they facilitate collusion amongst landlords to change above market rents. These companies collect real-time price and lease information from landlords and in return suggest rent increases, which helps landlords suppress price competition in the rental housing market and is exactly how price-fixing cartels operate. But instead of using code names and secret meetings, and price fixing is offered as a service. Talk to us a little bit more about what this is all
John,
about.
John, what this is about, and it's so good that you're willing to dig into it because the stakes are really high, is when people think of price fixing, they get a few folks who go over and go to the steak restaurant and they have some expensive drinks and they have some fancy steaks and they decide to set the prices so that they're going to pad their profits and everybody else is really going to get clobbered in their wallet. Well, that's the way it used to work, and certainly people will still try it. But today, what you're seeing is a lot of this price setting facilitated by algorithm.
Wow. And
these algorithms, sometimes are portrayed as kind of innocent, neutral computer formulas. But that's not really what they are at all. And if, for example, you got a couple of these big, firms combining competitors' rental property and pricing information, you suggest certain rent increases, it can be illegal collusion and basically facilitated by the algorithm. And so I have introduced two pieces of legislation. One is the Algorithm Accountability Act. That's designed to make sure that minorities don't get hammered in terms of denial rates, in terms of housing and education and the like. Wow. We've got a lot of support for that. And most recently, I've introduced legislation, a separate bill to deal just with the housing issue, called the Preventing the Algorithmic Facilitation of Rental Housing Cartels. And that's the kind of second example that I gave you.
Senator, how did this come to your attention? How did this come to the
Came to my attention this way, John. I showed up in the Senate, and nobody knew how to use a computer except one fellow. And I said, I don't know everything about this.
We don't want to date ourselves on that one.
But I'm going to get into this because, Oregon has always been about wood products and agriculture. We always will be. But I want us to get into technology as well. So I dug into these things. I wrote the digital signatures law, for example. That's the law that when you're signing your papers, you don't have to fill out 250 pages anymore. You can just click through the whole thing and be done in a few minutes. I wrote Section 230. That's the bill on the platforms that says the individual is responsible for what they post on the platform. I wrote the Internet Tax Non-Discrimination Act. And so I keep my antenna up for these technology issues because they obviously have such great implications for the way we live now, and we hire people.
Pro and con, I take it, right?
You
There's
pro
obviously
and con. My technology staff, I recruit them like they're Damian Lillard and LeBron James.
I hear you,
we got
because sometimes,
the best.
because sometimes the bad seed could be planted in the seed amongst the seeds, right?
You got it.
So as you move through this, and so I hear you're presenting a bill in relationship to this algorithm situation that you got going on. Tell us a little bit about the bill.
Well, what it's going to do, it is a fit with the Federal Trade Commission's investigation. The Federal Trade Commission, in effect, said, I was bringing up valid issues. So they are looking at it administratively. I'm looking at it in terms of how, as a matter of legislation, these practices suppress competition in the market. It deems algorithmic facilitation a violation of the big major law in this area, what's called the Sherman Act. So I'm proposing legislation, and the Federal Trade Commission is already looking at the issues that I presented.
I mean, John, we talk about this all the time in our office. Senator Wyden, is the American dream dead, right? And Dr. Holt, you can speak to this because you sit on the Housing Oversight Committee too. It's like, the American dream used to be, a home, right? And
Business
I think
ownership,
yeah,
home, taxpayers.
and I think in this, in the research that you provided to the public, what was 70% of the rental housing in Seattle was owned by 10 companies, right? Leaving 30% of the sort of inventory out there for the rest of us. So when you talk about federal trade and fair competition, I guess I wonder where's the fair competition just for the average American citizen these days?
I think that's one of the reasons I've got the government's attention, the Federal Trade Commission, and my colleagues in the legislature. I mean, we've got a very substantial people who spend more than 50% of their money on rents, and we've had a number of very suspicious denials. John made mention of one I called out, the Navy Federal's mortgage lending program.
Mm-hmm.
They're the nation's largest credit union, and after statistical analysis, they found that black applicants to these programs were more than twice as likely to be denied as white applicants. And they looked at a host of issues, and apropos of your point, that's just not right. That's not fair. That's not equal treatment under the law, and that's why I'm looking at both my legislative, approach and trying to change it by working with the Federal Trade Commission.
Wow, that's exciting. I mean, because when I think about what is actually going on down in Washington, Senator, in light of some of the strategic agendas that have supported some of the civil rights and the black agenda in this country, and the perception that it is under attack at this point in time, how is that climate, not to sidetrack on this, but is that climate visible in D.C. at this point in time?
Yeah.
Or is it supportive still of the platform and the agenda?
Well, I think we understand that there are some core issues that you've got to, deal with here. If you're seeing shady companies use algorithms to help landlords collude to inflate rates, that hurts the very people that you're talking about. I was thrilled when President Biden basically agreed with my assessment of this algorithmic rent fixing, because he talked about landlord cartels in his State of the Union address. So,
right on.
These are bedrock issues for families and for people of modest means. And the thing about housing is, if you don't get a fair shake in the rental market, how in the world are you going to be able to get in decent financial shape to become a first-time home buyer?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you bringing that up. I was just looking at the federal investments for 2024 that you, Senator, and Senator Merkley supported here for Oregon, specifically a $2 million amount that is going to the Williams and Russell project right here in Portland, and my company happened to facilitate that process. So it's exciting to see the investment happening. Concern that's from a national standpoint, what you're talking about impacts everybody, and we're glad to hear that. In the state of Oregon, we've got a very unique situation for black and brown people, in that, number one, we're already small in our percentage, and then number two, because of these kinds of iterative processes that continue to move the needle, move the bar, and keep us from opportunities of home ownership, et cetera, not to even mention or get into the whole economic disparity where the businesses come in, the economic disparity around what we make. As you're looking at Oregon, are there any specific things that are kind of catching your heart and your mind along the lines of this work?
Well, I just look at all the people who are coming to my town hall meetings, and I ask people, about their housing situation, and they will tell you they're spending more than 50% on rent. And so I've had more than 1,080 town hall meetings. I got 4 of them, coming up, and I think that you can't do the job right just sitting at your desk in Washington, D.C. You got to get out and talk to people, and I think people just feel like they're getting mugged on housing prices.
We are,
and rental prices in particular.
Yeah, there is no neighborhood in the city of Portland or in the metro area where a black family can afford to rent. We're rent burdened, absolutely. And part of that gets back into or is associated with our economic opportunity. You know this. You've been here for quite a bit of time, that on Williams Street alone, from Killingsworth to Broadway, at one point there were 300 black-owned businesses, and now they're less than 3.
Less than 3. And then, of course, with the Nike store closure, it's really kicking us in the butt on that lower bit of MLK, Ron. So, I mean, we've never had a business deficiency in our district, and we're starting to see that they're going away slowly. Every month we're losing 1 or 2, and the storefronts are becoming more and more visible and available. And so, this whole it's starting to look at the focus of housing, and fentanyl is consuming us. What are your thoughts about the
fentanyl battle is really twofold, and it relates also to the voting that we just had in the election, because I think the election said a lot about what folks want in terms of law enforcement and the like. And I think I'll start with that. I think that, and this goes to kind of setting the environment for business and the like, because crime can affect it. I think that people in Portland, all across the city, they want to be safe in their homes and their businesses and their streets, and they want to make sure that there is justice for every single person, which means that there needs to be treatment and prevention in terms of these health issues. I think Portland hadn't been getting that right. Some go with one or the other. We need them both.
Agreed.
We need them both.
Agreed.
And what you send with messages, if you don't do them both, is just what you were saying. We don't have the business activity that we ought to have in Northeast. And I think fentanyl, again, is a 2-part strategy. I think I'm trying as chairman of the finance committee to make sure we get tough with the cartels. Stop them from money laundering, beef up the sanctions, go after them, hard. At the same time, there's a healthcare, piece. We had a young man come and testify from Fourth Dimension, the recovery, center. He came up to me at Fred Meyer a couple months ago. I said, "You're Senator Wyden?" "Yes, I am." He goes, "You guys interested in doing something about fentanyl?" I said, "Of course we are. We're getting ready to have a hearing." And he said, "Can we talk to you?" And he found himself sitting at the Senate Finance Committee testimony room, a couple days ago.
Come
and
on, man, really? Yeah,
he was right there.
You brought it
In fact,
right to the front line.
I told everybody. I told the story in front of the whole Senate. I said, "I've been to every Fred Meyer in Oregon. I've had a chicken at every Fred Meyer in Oregon." I saw this young man, coming, and the young man said to the audience, "What a performer!" He goes, "Yeah, let's go get a chicken later."
Hey, that's always a hot item. Ron, where you go? That $5 chicken.
If you love someone who's gambling too much, you may feel like you're on a roller coaster. The ups and downs are beyond your control. And sometimes, sadly, the person taking the risks may not even see how their actions are impacting those around them. Here in Oregon, effective help is available to both people with gambling concerns and those who are affected by someone else's gambling. Call, chat, or text with us at opgr.org. Best of all, help is free.
The economics is real because, as John alluded to, Senator Wyden is, of course, these cartels. This is serious stuff. Price gouging is serious stuff. Investing into our business community, especially in Oregon here, is serious stuff. And I think maybe, as organizations that represent thousands of small businesses in Multnomah County alone, 94% of the businesses are small right now, right? We've had a lot of, in Portland, large corporate divestment, right? They're fentanyl, all these issues, the price gouging, the high rises of rent, the lack of housing. But how can we really marry business investments and these social service and housing stability investments? For example, I think through Business Oregon, there were $56 million in asks from community-based organizations and small businesses, all coming with a plan to hire staff, hire employees, and grow their revenue. Recently, Prosper Portland in the city of Portland had $105 million in asks from over 400 small businesses and community-based organizations. And again, each application outlined a plan to hire employees and grow revenue. Yet, Business Oregon only had $18 million to give, and Prosper Portland, out of the $105 million asked, only had $5 million to give. The total of $178 million to get businesses back on track, hire employees, grow the economy. It feels like it's not a lot compared to, over the last 10 years, just the city of Portland alone has spent $1.7 billion on the homeless situation. I'm just wondering, we get the problems, we get the gouging. Do you feel like there's an equal to focus on investing back into our small business community?
There's a lot more to do, and let me give you one path that that your listeners can pick up on. Senator Merkley and I'm chairman of the Finance Committee. He's an influential member of the Appropriations Committee, the Spending Committee. Every year, we designate a certain number of priorities that we call community investments, congressionally designated spending on community investments. I want to say on this show on the podcast that I'm happy, and I think I can speak for Senator Merkley, to see and receive any ideas from the community for things that are really targeted towards exactly what you're talking about, helping business,
that's awesome,
meeting the needs of people in terms of training and services.
And I wonder that because I'm saying, okay, so the applicants that were denied, there's your future vision, right? Why can't we take $178 million and fund them all?
Well, I'll tell you the other thing, because my whole day revolves around trying to do these bread and butter kind of approaches that really relate to the community well-being. I've got a big effort trying to attract more minorities to healthcare jobs because we know that there's going to be a tremendous set of opportunities in healthcare. We're living longer, but it doesn't make it easy, and I'm spending time on those kinds of issues.
Well, just one more question on the healthcare, because I know Narcan is a big thing, and is that federally subsidized, Narcan? For the fentanyl crisis,
yeah. Well, the drugs that help people get back on their feet are important, because if you don't get them right away, you can die. And
of course,
I'm working on getting these medication treatments underway. Guess what the big obstacle is? A lot of the big insurance companies are putting in something called prior authorization.
Right.
And if the insurance companies are doing prior authorization for somebody who's,
right now,
whose life
crisis,
is right on the line, he isn't going to be around if he doesn't get it. So that was what I was talking about on Thursday in Washington.
Well, I was just wondering, because, I just feel like who's ever making Narcan is certainly probably experienced and elevated in their profit. Could we potentially carve out taxes for that to invest back into small businesses?
We're looking at those issues.
Okay.
Yeah, and those issues need to have a tail on them, Ronnie. I mean, because one of the things of being in the industry, being a clinical person, mental health, all of that, Narcan has historically also been an elevator for the potential for death also. People get it after they've OD'd. Then the first thing they do is they wake up after getting a hit of Narcan and they want to go back out and get a better hit. And so we have to make sure we look at the recidivism also about that drug also and its impact.
I don't think you want your United States Senator making judgments about every drug.
Maybe not.
The point is, at our hearing, we were looking at medication-based treatments, and there's a real opportunity for doing it.
Right.
And I'm going to force these private insurance companies that make gigantic sums of money from taxpayers and others to do their fair share.
Right on, dude. Right
Well,
on.
I want to go back to, and I appreciate the
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
I want to go back to when we were talking about related to, so I'm a housing guy. Housing and economy, both are extremely important to me because they're dovetailed, right? It's kind of like a three-legged stool. It's education, it's economy, and it's housing. And I believe housing starts and is the center for it all, because if you have a stable house, you've got a stable neighborhood, you've got a sense of stability for kids. They then can do homework and have a vision, et cetera, et cetera. So around this Navy Federal Credit Union racial disparity work that you're doing, two questions associated. One is, what's the hope of the finding? And then, and I don't know if you can answer this, but how does it speak to, or what are your thoughts related to the disparities specifically in Oregon? Because our numbers are phenomenal as it relates to blacks getting housing, as it relates to blacks getting able to purchase, the whole economic barriers, et cetera, et cetera. So
I'm trying to get all the federal agencies that are looking at these issues to put the spotlight on Oregon as well.
Come on.
We don't get quite as much notice in all these studies and the like. I mean, you know how they do it. They go, well, Oregon's 3,000 miles away, so that's it. And then they say the minority population isn't as large as it might be in another town in the East Coast and the like. And I'm saying, what are you talking about? We pay lots of taxes. And I'm home, and I talk to a lot of minority folks, so don't give me this baloney that you can't find a minority person.
Thank you.
So I make that kind of my sort of prism. When I hear about these studies, I say, I'm the chairman of this committee, and I will be asking you, I say this, when you come up here and you talk about your results, I am going to ask you about how this affects minority people and the people I represent. I'll give you an example. We passed a big organ transplant bill to make changes in organ transplants. Well, you know who gets hammered in terms of organ transplants, and particularly with access to, you think you're not a physician, are you? You're a social scientist. Okay. But the people who get hammered in terms of organ transplant problems are blacks, and they don't get access to kidneys and a lot of other things that are essential.
Wow.
We've got the new law passed, and every time I have a chance to talk to these agencies, how's it going with getting this changed so that there's fair treatment of black Americans?
And I appreciate that. That's the kind of dogged determination, focus, relentless effort that has to happen around housing here in our city, that has to happen around economic opportunity here in our city. I'm sure you know the area median income for the average black family is less than half of that of an average white family right here in the city. So when it comes to being able to purchase a home, we're already knocked out. And then when it comes to affordable rental, we're more than 50% of the income is going. So the rent burdened dynamic is just the lived experience, and we need some champions. So I'm excited about that and glad to hear that that's something that's a concern for you for here in the city of Portland. I think it's something that everybody else needs to know.
Yeah, I agree. And so, Senator, you want to respond to that at this point? Or
No, I think we basically are in agreement here. I mean, this represents a major economic, challenge. And look, we're trying to find the pieces to bring this community back. We got Rakaya Adams and the Albina Project.
Right.
Phil Knight, put a lot of, effort. I and the congressional delegation was able to come up with a significant amount of money. That's very encouraging. We're going to do it. In fact, so encouraging that, the Albina Project is going to be one of the nicer showcases for the whole city, not just, not just Northeast. So we're doing it. I'm spending a lot of time on semiconductors. I think the chips and whole question of semiconductors, because we use them from the time we get up in the morning until the time we get at night, is a real opportunity for minority communities to make a big difference, because we need a lot of workers.
Yeah.
We need a lot of workers, and you get out of high school, you get paid a good wage, and I'm focusing on those kinds of programs. Roads, bridges, transportation systems, healthcare. Those 3-4 areas that I think are well tailored to our job here. But just as John said, I tell people all the time, I'm chairman of the committee. They're happy to give me a portrait or some such thing. I'm not in this to get a portrait. I'm in it to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And to, really, go in there, and like I did, played basketball, come to play every day.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the investment of the $350 million, or is it 350 or was it 450? $450 million that has come to the I-5 Rose Quarter project, and continuance of and kind of restitching together the neighborhood that was so directly decimated by federal action in the late 60s when I-5 was built.
I mentioned how the feds do it. I got a book coming out here fairly shortly, and I mentioned how some of that happened.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Well, we're interestingly enough, my company is very much involved in facilitating that process with the Historic Albina Advisory Board,
Right,
along
to have.
with Albina Vision Trust. And
Right,
John happens to
right.
sit on.
You doing
Yeah.
stuff with
Historic.
Andrew? You doing stuff with the construction company, Andrew Colas?
We're
Oh,
doing
yeah.
that.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and it's Jeff Moreland who
Jeff
is
Moreland.
involved, Raymore Construction, and absolutely. So we're very much involved in all of that. Rakaya and her leadership, Winta and the team. The hope is to be very collaborative in what we do and leverage, hopefully, future opportunities for further
let's
investments.
do this, because I'm going to have to get out the door. I'm juggling today.
Yeah.
John, are there other things you want to cover?
Senator, we've come to some clarity. One question that I have been wanting to ask you, and in light of the things down in D.C., Senator, is the American dream dying? And let me preface that a little bit. Is the whole ideal on the national, is small business still the backbone of this country? Because the struggle that we're having over here is representational. The question still remains in our minds, do they matter still? Does the small business sector matter? I mean, in reference to the social service needs that we have, the housing needs that we have. Is the same construct, the American dream, still rooted and supported by the small business?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I tell everybody, when you're done with the fingers on both hands, you have covered the number of big businesses we have in Oregon.
Yes.
We are overwhelmingly a small business state. So you may have heard that I'm leading the effort to get this tax bill, through, where we have help for small businesses, research and development assistance, the child tax credit, these kinds of things. And I think we're going to get it. I think we're going to get it done. We got 357 votes in the House of Representatives. I was taking it to the Senate Republican leadership. Yesterday I said, you promised, all those small businesses 7 years ago that you were going to take care of their research and development stuff. So we're on it. And to me, I gave you a kind of insight about how I work with the agencies, and that keeps saying, remember Portland, Oregon, your chairman's got an election certificate, from, the people of Oregon. And I think we're making progress, but I'll close the way I think about these things. There was a great Israeli ambassador, and there was a lot of debate about who said it, and they decided it was him. And at one point in an argument, 20 years or so ago, he was asked about, is America going to get it together? Is America going to get it right? And he said, never forget. His name is aBa. The Americans always get it right. And then people kind of looked a little skeptical, and he goes, after they've tried everything else.
Thank you. Hey, folks, welcome to this exciting episode of Black Beat Podcast. Senator Ron Wyden, we are so appreciative of you to come into the house and bless us with your presence. And hey, man, welcome home for a little while. Enjoy your stay while you're here.
God bless.
But,
I'll
man,
be back.
But we're coming to you with a bigger
Good.
and better plan constantly,
Good.
Senator. So stay tuned, and we'll be knocking at the door, letting you know we got some thoughts in mind.
We're on the program.
Hey,
Thank you.
And y'all, look, scroll down, hit that subscribe button to Flossin TV, and listen. This was a barn burner. I don't know about any of y'all, but Mr. Senator Wyden, you shot a few free throws at this point, and you knocked them down. We appreciate you
I
being
got to
at
work
the
on
house.
my 3.
We appreciate you, big fella. Thank you again.
Thanks
Yes.
a lot.